What about like Aristotle and the law of non-contradiction? And his, some people have called it a transcendental argument. It's justified because you can't not use it. What would you make of his argument there about non-contradiction?
Right. So you're looking at maybe the arguments from Metaphysics book Gamma
Hmm.
there. And I think what Aristotle is doing is illustrating the practical impossibility of doing without it.
Okay.
Um, I think it was Epictetus who did something similar with logic in general. He was about to give a set of lectures on logic, and somebody called out, "Prove to me that logic is useful."
Mm.
And he said, "Oh, you want me to prove that logic is useful? Yeah, prove that it's useful. Okay, and if I do that, I'm going to have to give you an argument, right? Yeah, you're going to have to give me an argument. And that had better be a logical argument, shouldn't it? Yeah, it's going to have to be a logical argument." And, Epictetus has seen this trap coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
And he says, "How are you going to know if I'm bullshitting you?"
Yeah.
And there's no answer. And he says, "See how important logic is?
Mm.
See how useful it is? Without it, you can't even tell whether logic is useful."
Yeah.
Which is a lovely answer. I think Aristotle's pulling a similar move there. But ultimately, the point that lies behind the move is, for at least some of these things, you just see it. This is what we call meta-foundationalism.
Okay.
There is no further place, no further point where we go to say, "Oh, but I just, I'm thinking about the structure of this reasoning, and I just don't know whether this is rational. I need something else to help me." For some things, it's just transparent at the bottom. And if you have somebody who's going to be a verbal troll and say, "Oh, I don't get it," the best thing that you can do is to use one of these transcendental arguments to try to show, if not him, then at least the other people who might be listening in, that this is not really a reasonable question.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily like established by a transcendental argument. That's just showing that like it's refuting the objection, but it's just rationally intuited. It's
We don't always see by rational intuition all of the things that we might.
okay.
Right? When a great mathematician like the Indian prodigy Ramanujan sees that a certain number is the smallest number that can be expressed as the sum of three cubes in two different ways, or something crazy like that. I'm just like, "Oh, you just see that," right? So there are some things some people see and other people don't.
Hmm.
When there's something that really is rationally compelling, but for some reason someone's finding it a little difficult to see, we try to build intuition pumps
Yeah.
and use other means to bring them to the point of seeing that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, as long
Hmm.
as we don't fall into the trap of saying we ourselves have no other way of showing that anything is a rationally compelling form of reasoning or method of arriving at beliefs other than using some method of arriving at beliefs and saying that. No, sometimes you just stop and you say, "I see this.
Yeah.
This one really is valid." And
Hmm.
if someone else can't see it, there's a limit to how much you can do to help. You can try to give transcendental arguments. You can try to do intuition prompts. You can try to give maybe concrete examples. Like when I have students who are having trouble wrestling with the definition of the material conditional logic, the if P then Q that we use in symbolic logic,
Hmm.
sometimes I'll say, "Well, consider this case. I tell you, if you apply for this job, we will hire you. Under what condition would you say what I told you is false?" And the only one is, you do apply for the job, but we don't hire you.
Yeah.
And I use that to help them to get the feel that it's not too crazy to fill the T's and the F's in a truth table in this way.
Right.
The concrete example helps some people, whereas the abstract if P then Q just seem to be floating around in some kind of, Plato's purgatory, I'll call it, a place where there are these abstract things, but we're not quite sure that they're friendly.
Right.
But you make it concrete, it's easier to grasp. So we look for ways of making these things easier to grasp. But in
Okay.
the end, those are just stepping stones, aids. They're not the fundamental insight itself.